everyone to Beat the Game. My name's Steve, and today we're going to talk about Stormin' Norman, the Green Goblin. Alright, so yes guys, if you guys like these videos, please share, like, and subscribe. And without further ado, let's dive into the risky business scenario. Alright, first of all, disclaimer, this is going to be a little bit of a different take on my Why Do I Always Lose series. I'm just going to approach it a little bit differently because it's the scenario is, I think, one of the easiest scenarios in the game. I think even more than Rhino. This is personally. It does offer some challenges, but it is something that can easily be overcome. And then we're going to dive into this in a little bit. But yeah, so I'm going to do it a little bit differently than the other videos. And that's just because of the nature of this scenario. And we'll talk about that. All right, let's go. So first things first, let's talk about the setup of the game. Before we talk about Norman Osborn and his stats, let's talk about... well, first of all, let's talk about the card itself. Norman Osborn, you're like, oh, how come yours looks different than mine? Well, this actually is part of a organized play story kit. So this is what the Norman Osborn looks like, and when you flip him, you actually get the Norman Osborn it kind of looks like full art comic book cover. So this was a cool little promo if you had a chance to find it at your local game store. They might still be available in some stores. Make sure that you ask your local game store, see if they still have some. If not, you can definitely find those on the Etsy or secondary market off eBay and stuff like that. Now, quick disclaimer, it's kind of funny. FFG kind of made a little bit of a boo-boo. So you see how the villain schemes? Well, in the story kits, there's the Green Goblin ones and there's the Wrecking Crew ones. And they actually thwart instead of scheme. So this was a little oversight on the FFG's part. Does it make him horrible? It really doesn't matter. But and that's probably what they said is yeah, we already paid for the printing and everything. Somebody forgot to do. I hope somebody got tisk and is going to proofread their stuff next time, because that's kind of silly. It's a silly mistake for the company, but whatever, it's all good. All right, so there you go. That being said, let's dive into our game. All right, so first things first, Norman Osborn will come in with an environment kind of like the Ultron drone environment from the Ultron standard campaign. In this expansion, we have Criminal Enterprise. Now, it comes into play, it's an environment that has 2 per player infamy counters on it. And if there are no infamy counters here, flip Norman Osborn and the Criminal Enterprise. So one quick way to keep track of the infamy counters, you can use in solo play. You can just use the little tokens that you can put on the I forget the enhanced reflexes and all these these one-of tokens, like your web shooter tokens. One thing I do recommend in multiplayer, I recommend using dice instead, because it can go up pretty fast, this Criminal Enterprise. But you're like, Steve, how do I get rid of Criminal Enterprise? Well, this is pretty easy. We'll talk about that in a second. But on the flip side, because this has been another card, it's something that came into the chat, because for some reason we have trouble reading cards. It says, when there are no infamy counters here, flip Norman Osborn and Criminal Enterprise. And the question that's been popping up is I can't find my State of Madness card. Ding, ding, ding. It's flip the card. Bang. So that's the whole theme of this. Norman Osborn has an alter ego and he has a villain side. So when there's no more infamy counters, it turns into Green Goblin. State of Madness. And then the State of Madness enters play again with 2 per player, but this time instead of infamy counter, it's madness counters. And if there's no madness counters here, flip Green Goblin and State of Madness back to Norman Osborn. So what's really cool about this scenario is you can really get a sense of the feeling of Norman Osborn flipping back and forth very often, and that is so true in solo play because it's only 2 State of Madness cards, and what we'll see in his villain kit, there is a lot of cards that will either place infamy counters or remove madness counters, which is going to really trigger his effects very often of flipping back and forth. And that is something that I think is super cool for this scenario. All right, so let's now take a look at we'll take away the criminal enterprise. But you're like, Steve, how do we remove criminal enterprises counters? Well, that's something, let's just read. All right, so Norman Osborn, stage 1, has 14 health. He has a scheme of 2 and no attacks. Interesting. All right, so let's look at the card. It says Forced Interrupt. When Norman Osborn would attack, place 1 infamy counter on criminal enterprise instead. Ooh, oh, okay. So if I'm in hero form, so when does he attack? If I am in hero form. So if I'm in hero and he's in alter ego, he does not attack. He just grows his criminal empire, which means I have to and then let's see. Force interrupt, let's continue reading. When Norman Osborn would take any amount of damage, remove that many infamy counters from criminal enterprise instead. So we cannot damage Norman Osborn, but we can damage his criminal empire. And then the more damage you do on his criminal empire, it drives him crazy, and then he goes into his madness state and then goes kablonkers. And then turns into the Green Goblin. All right. So this is something that's super fun. So if I'm in alter ego and he's in alter ego, he is going to scheme. But if I'm in hero form, instead of attacking me and drawing a boost card, now this is something very important. He does not get boost cards because it's instead. So that is something very cool. When he would attack, he does not get a boost card if I'm in hero form and he's in alter ego. If he schemes, then yes, he will get that boost card, all right? So that's very, very important, all right? Now, once there's none, it goes here. So, other thing, little side note, if you deal, let's say if there's 2 infamy counters here and you would deal 3 damage, you have an attack of 3, okay? Well, all you're going to be doing is you're technically wasting 1 damage. So this is going to go from 2 to 0, and then it's going to flip. The extra damage will not go on to the Green Goblin. So you're not going to reduce his health by 1. So if you have like a super attack, you got to wait till he flips. Now, something very cool. You're like, oh, okay, he flip-flops. Now, herein lies the danger. Now, this is where the game gets interesting, and this is what I like about the Green Goblin. Let's look at his stats. He has 14 health, obviously, and he has a star value for the thwart, so he cannot scheme. So if you draw the advance, nothing happens, all right? You'll see there's a replacement effect. And then he has an attack of 3. Wow, an attack of 3 on stage 1? That seems pretty high, and it is pretty high. So that's one of the stronger attacks for a stage 1 card. We saw all the other villains have like 2 or 1. Even Claw has 0. So that's pretty high. So he starts off with a 3 attack. So he can really hurt you very, very easy. But that is not all. It says, when revealed. What does that mean? So as soon as we flip this card, we place the madness counters, there is a when revealed effect. So deal 3 indirect damage to each player in hero form. So if I'm in alter ego and I have one of my allies attack, and I'm playing on the standard mode, this will not affect me. Woof! So if I can deal damage with my ally and flip him, this is actually super good, super useful, because then I will evade that 3 damage. If I don't have an ally, then I will take 3 indirect damage. Remember, indirect damage can be placed on different characters, but you cannot, let's say you have a Mockingbird with 1 health left, you wouldn't be able to put the 3 indirect damage on her. You could only go up to a maximum of 1, and that's it. So this is little side things that you know. And then there is a star. There is a forced interrupt. So if we read the card, when Green Goblin would scheme, remove one madness counter from State of Madness instead. So this is something very fun. So this is where I think the mechanics can kind of be abused in a way where, oh, okay, he never schemes. I just flip him. I can stay in alter ego and not worry about the main threat going up because he doesn't really scheme when he's in villain form. So that, I think, is where it makes it a little bit easier. He doesn't attack you when you are in when he's in Norman Osborn form, and he doesn't scheme when he's in Green Goblin form. So if you understand what form to be in when he's not, it can kind of give you a good advantage against him, and that's, I think, why people think it's an easy scenario, which I can't disagree with that. If you find a way to abuse the mechanics, you can really make this scenario a walk in the park almost every game. But we're not going to talk about that. Let's just talk about what happens. So this is stage 1. All right, so stage 1, Green Goblin. Let's look at stage 2. Let's say you play on expert mode. Let's look at this. All right, so one thing. If you defeat the Green Goblin stage 1 on his villain form, all right? So normally, obviously, if you're going to defeat Green Goblin, you can only defeat him while he's in the Green Goblin form. So if you defeat him, you defeat his 14 health. Green Goblin 2 is going to come into play. He will have 18 health. He will have, again, no thwart value, no scheme value, but an attack of 4. Wow. So an attack of 4, again, super strong. That's Rhino level strong, and on his stage 3 Rhino. So that's pretty strong. And again, a when reveal effect. So again, you're going to go from stage 1, and then stage 2. So when reveal is going to trigger deal 4 indirect damage to each player. So this doesn't matter if you're an alter ego or not. Now this is where it can be really dangerous, this scenario. So 4 indirect damage to each player means if you don't have an ally, you're taking all that 4 indirect damage yourself, regardless if you're an alter ego or hero form. So low characters like Black Widow or Hawkeye or even Quicksilver with their 9 health, this is going to be really challenging for them, keeping their HP levels high when you're flipping him back and forth because you're taking tons of damage. All right, and then again with an attack of 4, that makes it pretty crazy. And when Green Goblin with scheme, remove 1 madness counter instead. And then on stage 2, Norman Osborn has a scheme of 2, which is not that bad. And then force interrupt, when Norman Osborn would attack, now it's place 2 criminal counters on the criminal enterprise. 2 infamy counters on criminal enterprise. So then this can go up pretty significantly. All right. And force interrupt is the same. When he would take any amount of damage, remove that many infamy counters on the criminal enterprise instead. Now, if you're playing on expert level, all right, so this is going to go from stage 2 to stage 3. So if you manage to defeat his 18 health and you want to go to stage 3 Goblin, 22 health. Again, no scheme value, an attack of 4. Okay, so he hasn't gotten any stronger. But wait, it says when revealed, deal 4 damage to each player. So on stage 2, you could indirectly, put that on your allies and be safe. This way, it's 4 damage every time he flips. So this is basically most characters, it's 1/3 of their health. So Spider-Man has 10 health, so that's almost half his health just for flipping him. So again, if you just went from stage 2 to stage 3, bang, you're taking 4 indirect damage, and right after that, you're taking 4 direct damage to flip him. So this is where Green Goblin becomes really interesting, is all this damage, this extra damage out of nowhere that keeps piling on, which was forcing you to flip down to alter ego to try to recover and keep your health high, or else you're just going to lose to damage. And this is where in multiplayer it becomes way more interesting than solo, because oh man, we have to keep him on his Norman Osborn side, because if you flip him, I'm going to die. I'm at 4 health. I'm going to die. I can't do this. So this is where it gets super, super interesting in a multiplayer game, is trying to coordinate everyone's HP. So, okay, can we flip him now? Or else he's just going to kill us. So this is why I think Green Goblin has this really cool mechanic of flipping. Of course, you can kind of work around it. You know, you can add extra health, like endurance and stuff like that. So this is where it gets really, really fun for me, is that flippy mechanic and all that damage that comes in out of nowhere. So, and then once you defeat 22 health, then you've won the game. Merry Christmas for you. All right. Now, so we've seen this. Now let's look at his main scheme. His main scheme has 2 stages. So the first stage is called Hostile Takeover, all right? All right, so it says here, 7 per player. It starts into play at 2 per player, then it goes up by 1. All right, so in a 1-player game, it starts at 2. So technically, you only have like 5 turns to make it, you know, to keep it down under 7. And it says when completed, 1 per player. Infamy. Okay, place 1 per player infamy counters on criminal enterprise. Okay, so let's say there's this goes up. You're in Norman Osborn. He happens to scheme, and there's like four counters on the criminal enterprise. Well, you would add 1 in the 4-player game. You would add 4, and then discard 1 card from each player's deck for each infamy counter on criminal enterprise. So then there would be 5. So you would go, okay, let's take your top 5 cards and discard your top 5 cards. Okay, so that happens. Now, if he ever is on the State of Madness and this happens, you just ignore this effect completely, because again, criminal enterprise is not in play. And that can happen. Now, this is where, again, the game gets really dangerous. If you lose this main scheme, this is where this scenario becomes way more challenging, because right there, after that, you're going to be constantly playing on a heroic level if you're in solo play. And again, if you choose to ignore the main scheme and start on this, you'll see that this level of difficulty will be increased 1,000-fold. All right, so 10 per player, main scheme, corporate acquisition happens. If this stage is completed, the players will lose the game. So it only starts with 1 per player, which is fine. Okay, but it goes up by 2 per player. So it goes from 1 to 3, and then 3 to 5, and 5 to 7, 7 to 9. So it just basically doubles the speed in which the main scheme goes up. And also, you are stuck permanently with an extra encounter card. So this is going to be where it's going to get, whoa, okay, so now I'm dealing with 2 encounter cards per turn. This might just be a game loss if you happen to be a little bit unlucky with the cards, because it can just get out of control really, really fast. And you will find this out whilst we watch and look at his cards. All right, so again, once it goes up to the next stage, this is danger zone, because it's going to go up fast and it's going to become really, really dangerous. Now, let's look at the mechanics of the game again. So Norman Osborn cannot take damage while he's in Norman Osborn form. So you got to kind of work your way around that, kind of figure out what to do. Now, let's break down some of the things in his kit. 14 out of the 18 cards in his kit will either place infamy counters or remove madness counters. So if you are playing in a solo player game, this is going to become very, very challenging, because he is going to flip-flop all the time. You're going to have to waste a lot of attacks flipping him, taking a lot of damage every time he flips, and trying to keep him in goblin form as long as possible. So this is what we're going to be looking at in the type of cards that are going to be showed up. Now, the other thing is Norman Osborn has a ton of side schemes in his kit. So there's, I think, five side schemes in his deck, this is pretty big. There's a lot. The other one, his mutagen formula also had 5 side schemes. So again, we can see Norman Osborn, he's a genius. He's a thinker. So I love that they put a lot of side schemes in his deck. I think he has the most side schemes until Red Skull. I think 5 is the most side schemes that we see in any of the encounter decks. And that's just his main kit. Again, if you add modular sets, there's more side schemes, which just can get really out of control. And losing to side schemes is something that it happens regularly when we don't deal with them. All right, so let's look at some of the cards in his kit that are very, very thematic. All right, so Norman Osborn, again, he's a big guy. I think the most thematic card in his deck, and there's 4 copies of this, it's called All in a Day's Work. All right, and this is super simple. It's not a dangerous card. It's just an annoying card. Because what does it do? When revealed, place 2 infamy counters on Criminal Enterprise, and if you cannot, remove 2 madness counters from State of Madness. So again, in a solo play, that card makes the Green Goblin flip. All right, if it comes in as a boost card, and then I'm going to put a little parentheses on this. All right, so let's say he has 1 madness counter left, all right? And then he attacks you, and this is the boost card that comes out. Okay, place 1 infamy counter on Criminal Enterprise. If you cannot, remove 1 madness counter on State of Madness. So Green Goblin initiates his attack. All right, he wants to attack you, and he gets All in a Day's Work as a boost card. You will remove the State of Madness, which will trigger There is no State of Madness, which is going to bring it down to Criminal Enterprise. Green Goblin's attack will fizzle. So he will not deal damage. Nothing's going to happen. He is not going to attack and place 2 more. It just goes to waste. So this is another reason why people think the scenario is a little bit easy, is sometimes his big attacks are just going to go to waste. All right? So that's one way to that makes that happen. So that's a cool little interaction again with the game. So all in a day's work. So removing 2 infamy or placing 2 infamy counters or removing 2 madness counters. Great card. Love this a lot. Now, here's the next card that is super thematic to Norman Osborn. He's a big CEO. So big CEOs have their own set of bodyguards. So this is a 0 scheme minion with 1 attack, mercenary guard. While this minion is engaged with you, you cannot attack the villain. So again, this can just make his criminal enterprises go super high. And again, it's a 4 health minion. So again, it's pretty big. And there's also a boost icon that says place 1 infamy counter on Criminal Enterprise. If you cannot, remove 1 madness counter. So again, removing madness or placing more infamy as a boost. So that again is super annoying. That just adds more damage to do before you can actually flip him back to Green Goblin. And these guards, man, they can really do in some work. If you have a low damage character, it can really make this game a little bit more challenging. All right, so that is for the private security guard. The other card that's very thematic, hired guns. All right, so these are a little bit more like elite minions. They're still criminals. There's 3 in the deck. They have a scheme of 2, an attack of 2, and they have a when revealed effect. All right, when revealed, choose to either give the villain 1 face down boost card or place 2 infamy counters on Criminal Enterprise. Now, if you get this as an encounter card and the State of Madness is in play, you will not be able to complete part 2. So since you cannot complete part 2, you will have to give him a face down boost card. So that is going to be pretty fun. So he's already very powerful in his attacks. So you're going to just give him extra boost for his next attack. Now, this is like a double-edged sword for Green Goblin because of all these things that remove madness counters. when he attacks. So that again is going to increase his odds of flipping. So you might be in a position, oh, he only's got one madness counter. Okay, he's got 2 boosts. He's probably going to get his thing that flips him down. And then you're like, oh, I won't defend the attack. And then be like, oh no. And then he gets an attack of 7 and you're just like, ouch, I died. All right, so this is where it can be a little bit tricky. But the hired gun, 3 health minion, 2 attack, 2 thwart, 2 scheme. So very, very annoying and good minion for him to have. So again, super thematic. So he's got his thugs, he's got his bodyguards. Again, for both sides of the criminal enterprise. I love it. I love it. Super, super thematic. Now let's look at one of the last cards in his deck. It's called Mad Genius. And there's 2 copies of this in the deck. And when revealed, when revealed in a hero form. It's actually when revealed if he's Green Goblin. And then there's when revealed if he's Norman Osborn. Again, split personality cards. I do wish there was a little bit more cards on this that interacted with both stages in this scenario, because I think this is one of my favorite cards in the game for this scenario. It is the Mad Genius. If he is Green Goblin, he attacks the hero with the fewest hit points remaining, and if no attacks were made this way, this card gains Surge. So, which is very cool, even if he is stunned. All right? He wants to make an attack, it won't happen. It's not an attack. So it's going to actually surge and remove his stun. So that I think is very, very cool. So he's not going to attack. He's going to want to attack. It's going to do the replacement effect. He's stunned. It's not happening. This card is going to gain surge. And then it's going to flip again. And if he is in Norman Osborn, you will discard the top card of your deck for each infamy counter on the criminal enterprise. So if there's only 2, you just discard the top 2 cards of your deck. I think it could have been a little bit meaner as a card, you know. It could have been like, oh, like remove the top 2 cards from your deck or just something like that. But for me, it's just like, oh, it could have been something a little bit more dangerous, or place threat on the main scheme equal to the number of infamy, and that would have been a super scary card. I think that would have been a lot more scary than just discarding cards from the top of your deck. But again, that's why a lot of people think this scenario is a little bit too easy. Even if there's 10 infamy counters on the thing, you know what? You can just deal 10 damage one turn and then flip him. So it's kind of easy to keep control of that. So I think this is, again, a card that for me could have been way more dangerous, especially if he's Norman Osborn, just to kind of counterdict. I actually play it the way I mentioned it, where I will just place threat on the main scheme equal to the number of infamy counters. I think for me it makes a lot more sense, and it's just a little revision to increase the difficulty of this scenario. But again, it's up to you. You don't have to play it like that. All right, let's look at the other cards. So the last cards in his player deck, or in his villain kit, are, again, super fun and thematic. We got Oscorp Manufacturing, which is super cool. Again, a card that has double effects depending on what villain side he's on. So if he's Norman Osborn, or if he's Green Goblin. And this is, when revealed, Norman Osborn, place an additional 1 per player threat here. So this is either going to come out with 2 or 3, depending. Green Goblin, there's 2 per player. Norman Osborn, 3 per player, which is, again, pretty cool. And it's a triple boost icon. So that's pretty fun. And it doesn't have any boosts, so that's pretty good. Oh yeah, just like the State of Madness here, does not have the boost, the star icon. All right. So there's 2 of those. Pretty fun. Like, again, very thematic for him. And those are more acceleration tokens, so you kind of want to deal with them as soon as possible. The other one is Payoff. Again, very, very cool and thematic card for him. It is just a straight up +1 encounter card. 2 per player, and it does have a boost icon that says place 1 infamy counter or remove a madness counter. Again, all these things that remove madness counters are just going to make it really worse. But you really want to get rid of those scenarios. Those extra encounter cards can really pile up fast. So there you go. And the last card in his kit is the Collapsing Bridge. Again, another little side scheme, not too hard, not too overwhelming. It does have the crisis icon, which is nice, and it says 2 per player. Place 1 infamy as a. It's just a crisis icon with 2 per player. It says go deal with something else instead of dealing with him. So 2 per player, and again, if it comes out as a boost, it removes a madness counter or places 2 or places 1 infamy counter. So not the hardest cards. Like his kit does not have a lot of dangerous cards in it. And that's, I think, why I think that everyone thinks this scenario is way too easy. There is not a lot of bad cards. All right. So again, that's why I didn't want to kind of do the power level or danger level. It's pretty much all the same. It's placing cards, removing madness counters. The danger in this scenario comes from him flipping back and forth. And this is what you want to try to avoid as much as possible, because damage will get to you. So, one of the things here, let's talk about, the tips and tricks to play against this scenario, if you need any help. All right. One of the first tips that I'm going to say is probably try to include a target acquired. All right. Target acquired is going to cancel that star icon. So this is one of the rare occasions a max per player card, I will highly suggest to put at least 1 or 2 of them in if you want to try to avoid this whole him flipping back and forth. So having this is going to really help against that. All right, it's mostly for the madness counters. You don't really care if he puts infamy counters. But when he removes madness counters, this is the only thing that can prevent him from losing madness counters. Because again, you want to try to keep him in villain form as long as possible. Whoops, this card has a lot of reflection. You want to try to keep him in villain form as long as possible so you can deal damage to him and, advance in the game. All right, if you don't do that, it's just going to become a long, drawn out battle, and sometimes you might just have like 20 or 30 here. I've seen it one game, and again, we played a 4-player game, and there was like 30 something criminal counters here, and with all the accelerations, we were just like overwhelmed. We're like, there was guards everywhere. We did not have an aggression player, and it was just out of control. So it was insane. And he was like Norman Osborn the entire game. And I was like, what happened? How did we not flip this guy? And yeah, so we just actually had to give up because there's like 50 criminal counters on this thing, and it was just insane. So it does happen. If you choose to ignore stuff, sometimes it will just come back and bite you in the butt. Other tips and tricks. If you are playing in solo, one thing I would recommend in the beginning, early game, try to flip him maybe a couple times to Green Goblin and stay in Alter Ego. Because then you don't really have to worry about him scheming. So this is a good way to, make it easier on yourself if you're having trouble with the scenario. Stay in Alter Ego, recover, and then let him just take away his madness counters. He's only removing 1 on stage 1 on stage 2. The only time where it gets really annoying is on stage 3, where he's actually removing both of his his madness counters when he schemes. But every other card, you're pretty good. So you might get lucky, and he might just stay at 1 madness counter and then get another card, or get a hired gun, or a private security guard, and still stay in goblin form while you're in Alter Ego. So you can kind of avoid that damage. So again, this is kind of like what the main part is of this game. It's like kind of figuring out when to flip, when not to flip. I try to be in opposite. So if he's in Green Goblin, try to be in Alter Ego. If you're in Alter Ego, if you're in Hero, try to have him in Alter Ego, and then kind of build up your board. So there's ways to kind of build your board state until you're ready to deal a lot of damage in one shot. So that's why you can kind of play with the mechanics, and that's what makes him so much easier than every other villain is you can just kind of play with the form. Again, you have to be careful because if he's in Norman Osborn and gets that advance, and then you flip to stage 2 of this of the main scheme, then it's going to just become a heroic game, and then it might just get out of control pretty fast. So even though the scenario is simple, it still has ways that it can still punish you if you're not careful. All right, now this is my suggestion here. I would definitely suggest playing this with higher difficulty modular encounter sets. If you want to have the experience with the goblin gimmicks, it's okay, but it's not very challenging with the goblin gimmicks. I definitely recommend, if you've never tried Legions of Hydra or MODOK, this is a scenario where you want to actually try including those harder modular sets against this with this scenario. Okay, so if this is your you want to dip your toe into seeing how does that MODOK happen? It's Norman Osborn and MODOK, Norman Osborn and the Legions of Hydra. So this is where I think it's super fun. Again, the more guards with Legions of Hydra, MODOK, super painful, acceleration, the things that you can put on the bodyguards, and then you have to beat them twice. So this can really, really increase that difficulty challenge to where you want it to be. So that is it in a nutshell, guys, for Norman Osborn. Again, not the hardest scenario, but definitely something that you can play and really adjust the difficulty with those modular sets and make this scenario really interesting. If you haven't played it in a while, I definitely recommend revisit that scenario, put Anachronauts, put Legions of Hydra, put Doomsday Chair. Try your first game on Heroic. Try it with a Heroic game. Again, completely different experience. Way more challenging when you're trying that. Or look at Kennedy Hawk's The Return of Norman Osborn modular set too in the custom content, which is very, very cool and really ups the difficulty of this scenario. So again, super fun scenario, very thematic. Definitely try it out if you haven't tried it out. I think it's one of my favorite scenarios to play against, just because I like doing the Green Goblin. I love this when I flip and do the laugh thing. So that's just me. Green Goblin. All right, Norman Osborn. And then you just kind of just play with his voice. But that's just me. I'm just kind of cuckoo like that for Cocoa Puffs. But this, for me, is a super fun scenario. Thematic-wise, hit the nail on the head. The only thing I would say, again, my Mad Genius, that is the only card that I wish was just a little bit harder, and it could have been very, very cool. Again, if you use that to place threat on the main scheme, this is going to change that experience. You're going to fear this card way more than just discarding cards from your encounter deck. So guys, that was Steve. This is my breakdown of why would I always lose against Norman Osborn. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, share, like, subscribe. Please stay tuned. After this, we're going to have the Wrecking Crew, and then we're going to go into the Rise of Red Skull campaign for the next series, or for the continuation of this Why Do I Always Lose series. Guys, keep on playing Model Champions, and I hope this video will help you beat the game. Ciao, ciao.